Hello everyone and welcome to my channel, Alan's Cloud. My name is Alan Samsel, and today's video we're going to be talking about Proxmox and doing PCIe Passthrough, the updated versions of Proxmox, version 6.1 and the latest release of it, 6.2, as of yesterday. And some of the issues that you may have been running into when trying to do, say, GPU Passthrough, and that's a big thing that people like to do with using Proxmox. I do it myself, which is kind of why we're here today. So if any of that's interesting to you, please stick around. All right, so let's get right to it and start talking about Proxmox and GPU Passthrough, or PCIe Passthrough. Yeah, this kind of applies to both, but I'm using these functions for GPU Passthrough. As of 2 days ago or 3 days ago, I had loaded my test Dell R710 server with a new graphics card. I put a Quadro K4000 in there, and I had Proxmox 6.1 on there at the time, and I wanted to spin up a virtual machine of Windows 10 in order to test hardware acceleration in Plex. Something that I have been able to achieve before with different GPUs, but I wanted to do it with an NVIDIA graphics card, and this was the latest one that I had gotten. So I wanted to spin that up. I did get that working in version 6.1, and there's a trick to that, and if any of you have been running into it and you're staying on 6.1 for a little while, I'll pass that on to you here in a minute. But then yesterday 6.2 came out, and so I upgraded, and sure enough, that broke my virtual machine. I couldn't get it to boot. It was throwing me IOMMU group errors, and I managed to find a fix for that today too. I don't think that that's hit out there in the greater community yet, so this may be the first time you're hearing about it. So hopefully if you run into this problem, you can come here and find out what the fix for that is as well. So stick with it. We're gonna run through this real quick. So here, as you can see, is the Proxmox 6.2-4. So this is the very latest version. I've got this Windows 10 GPU. This is the test virtual machine that I had created under 6.1. And now I've got it back to working under 6.3. And I can actually show you here. So this is that desktop. And if I right click, show you the task manager. And we go to performance. Here is the NVIDIA Quadro GPU. It's passed through. It's got the drivers, latest drivers from NVIDIA on there, and there's no code 43. So it's very possible to get an NVIDIA graphics card working inside of a virtual machine in both Proxmox 6.1 and 6.2. So proof, it's there, it does work. Let's go back here to Firefox. So here in the virtual machine, when you're under 6.1, here's where the issue comes in. So under Proxmox 6.1, they're running QEMU 4.1.1. And in there's a little bug. And I found it in some forums when I was searching and trying to get this to work myself under 6.1. This particular user here, Trevor J, found out what the issue is, a little digging. QEMU 4.0 has an issue, and if you want to get PCIe Passthrough to work, he gives you two options here. You can either revert back to and manually set in your virtual machine's config file to PC-Q35-3.1, or you can stick with just the stock Q35, and you can add this kernel IR_IRQ chip equals on. When I found that and I put that into the arguments line in my configuration file, that worked. So that is what got PCIe Passthrough working and allowed me to pass through the GPU in Proxmox 6.1. So that's, minor revelation there. So he talks about a little bit about the patching and how Proxmox doesn't actually pass through the information on the regex pattern correctly. So if you're going to do this, and this is the way that I recommend, leaving leaving it Q35 and adding this kernel_IRQ chip equals on, where do you go about doing that? Well, let's go back to Remoter, and I will show you the config file for my virtual machine, for that one that you saw there that was up and running, pretty much when you're running under 6.1, in this arguments file line here, which you have probably already created in order to pass through these extra arguments for the NVIDIA 43 fix, this is where you're going to stick it. So you can put it right here at the end of, right before that here. Let's just move the cursor. Put it down here, and you would add yourself another comma, and what do you see? Kernel, can't spell today. Kernel underscore IRQ chip equals on. And that's it. You would, control out and, save with whatever program you're using. Here in Nano, it's control O for out, and then you can control X to quit it. And that will fix your Proxmox 6.1 GPU pass-through issues. Now, I'm not going to save that because it works fine for me. So we're going to switch back to Firefox here. And so that is good for Proxmox 6.1. So the announcement here for Proxmox 6.2, it's great, but what they've done here is they've upgraded the QEMU to version 5.0, and they've also increased the kernel to 5.4 for long term, right? So the kernel that we were using before in version 6.1 is different. So here in 6.2, these differences are what caused my Windows 10 virtual machine that I had working under 6.1 not to work. So first and foremost, this QEMU 5.0 fixes that IRQ chip equals on, the need for that additional argument. So just the stock Q35, and you'll be able to do PCIe Passthrough. But the change to the kernel is actually what started to cause it not to work for me, because in the 5.4 long-term kernel that they're using in here, they've actually introduced one of the functions that, if you follow all of the guides on how to turn on IOMMU support for your Dell R710s or for whatever device you're using to get all those different groups, most of the guides show you turning on a feature, and here I will show you. So this is I've cut and pasted. I'm sorry, I forget where this one's from. I've got several, and then I like to put it here into my book stack and then add to it as I need. So if you've gone through and you've edited the grub file, to add this Intel underscore IOMMU equals on, and all of these other commands down here at this line grub command line Linux default, you're going to have to add something extra in there. And what it is this module that you add later on in these other ones. You can see I've added a note here that if you're using Proxmox 6.2, you don't actually need this. This module has been incorporated into the new long-term kernel in 5.4. So this is no longer recognized. So when you come down here to the interrupt mapping and you try to activate that for unsaved interrupts, which I need in order to get this to work on my Dell R710, it doesn't see it, right? It's no longer supported here because that type 1 is already in the kernel. So instead of activating it here in this IOMMU underscore unsafe interrupts config file, you actually have to put it up here where the grub line is, right? So grub command line Linux default. Scroll over here. Now I don't use no mode set. That doesn't do anything to my R710s except blow up the on-screen display, and I don't like that, so I don't use that particular one on mine. And I've put a note here. But you can see here that this line VFIO underscore IOMMU underscore type 1 dot allow underscore unsafe underscore interrupts equals 1 is the new thing that you're going to have to add here in order to turn back on allow unsafe interrupts in order to get your virtual machines to do PCIe pass-through correctly under version 6.2. So that's a pretty quick down and dirty, differences between Proxmox version 6.1 and 6.2 and the trick to getting PCIe pass-through and specifically GPU pass-through to work for Proxmox 6.1 and for 6.2. So hopefully that helps. And that took me a little bit of Googling this morning and a little bit of trial and error, but it should work. So leave me some comments, and please like and subscribe to the channel if you would. And if you've got any other questions, hit me up at my new forum up here, and I'll create a new post about this particular topic, and we'll try to continue the conversation there if you got any questions. Thanks. Have a good one.